So
make it short.
yeah,
It is actually short.
So he's actually now serving as a vice. Completed his PhD in business administration from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and a BS in chemical engineering and MBA from University of New Hampshire. He's the editor of Journal of Bangladesh Studies since 1999. He has published widely in peer-reviewed and practitioner journals with around 5,000 citations in Google Scholar and H-Index 26. He has presented invited papers at Oxford University, the Harvard School of Public Health, and Cornell University South Asia Program on improving health services in developing countries. Recently, he presented a paper at a conference held at the University of California, Berkeley on health metrics for hospitals in Bangladesh, organized by Bangladesh Development Institute. His present pursuits are on the strategic initiatives and capacity development at a premier institution of higher education in Bangladesh. He was selected as a senior Fulbright scholar, twice selected as a Fulbright senior specialist, and served as a peer reviewer for the Fulbright senior specialist program. He has consulted for the World Bank, UNFPA, ILO, FAO, IFAL, and various corporate bodies in the United States. He has also advised the government of Bangladesh on various social development programs, including healthcare and education, and consulted widely for the private sector. He served on the expert panel of Transparency International Bangladesh. Dr. A, as called by his students at Penn State, I'm actually now quoting two students speaking about him. He's by far the best professor I have ever had. He goes out of his way to help his students and definitely knows what he's talking about. Don't take his class if you want an easy A, because it's hard as hell. An elder student, I have never had a more knowledgeable and enthusiastic professor. He's a great teacher, very patient, well-read, and worldly. He's smart, personable, and overall, just a great professor who really knows what he's talking about. Just Google his name for further proof. Take his class if you can. He's the recipient of teaching, research, and outreach awards at the Penn State University and has edited several books on socio-economic and political aspects of Bangladesh. His latest book has co-edited Strategic Marketing Management in South Asia. And we have also, he has actually, so far, I mean, with Scopus Index, what I can see that he has actually helped and partnered with 30 authors so far. One of his, I would say, esteemed, partner is present among us, Dr. Mahmudurrahman, in his recent co-edited book on strategic management in South Asia. And he has left his footprint wherever he went, East West University, Bragg University, and has developed actually so many researchers from Bangladesh. We hope that this lesson and this session will also endow us some inspirations and some insight from you. Thank you.
Shall we start? Namaskar. Good morning. What a wonderful introduction. I did not know you were talking about me. Because I usually don't go and look up what is being said about me. So it's always refreshing to see that I'm reaching students. That's what I want to talk about also roughly today. It's not about teaching, it's how you reach students. And unless we do that, the reaching is not only about their minds. You also reach them in their hearts, you reach them in their souls. That's when you make the true impact. So that's the essence of what we are going to be talking about. Yes, I have noticed that. Thank you. I am suffering a little bit, my voice. So if you can think of the scale, sa re ga ma pa, I can go up to ma. Ta pa dha ni ar udbe na kola. So I would have you understand that, because this job keeps me talking continuously with various stakeholders, and as a result, it kind of places a huge amount of stress on the voice, and I think I need to take about a week to 2 weeks off before I can have this adjust. I'm going to take 30 seconds to turn off my cell phone. I would request all of you, if you don't mind, to do that. I come to you as a Vice Chancellor. I come to you as a researcher, as a fellow colleague, because that's what I basically am. Vice Chancellor job is only samohik bolte pari. It's been only for a short time. And I think it's one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had to look at the academic institutions from inside. I think when I'm done here, I'll probably write one of the books that basically addresses the notion of how do you build world-class institutions. You probably know that BRAC University is now in the QS Asian University rankings. So I feel proud that I've been able to lead BRAC University into the rankings. Although all of you know that rankings are only dependent on the criteria that you use. So if you change some of the criteria, perhaps from what I hear about UI, United International, you're doing a lot of very wonderful things. You're doing some very innovative things, particularly in the realm of research. I've heard how much you're budgeting and how much the incentives are there for those who publish in Scopus and ranked journals. And I think that is the way to go. We have for far too long relied on numbers. I think we should make now a transition to quality. So I'd rather see that you do 2 journal articles in 5 years that other people are reading and citing, rather than writing 20 journal articles that only you will read, no one else will read. And it will not have an impact, which is why we have this thing called the impact factor. So I want to spend this time with you today on 2 things. One is on the element of teaching, and after the break we can talk a little bit about research, what needs to be done to be able to do research. As you know, these are the 2 fundamental things about any university that wants to make an impact. There is a third dimension which also I'm trying to push at BRAC University hard, the dimension of service. And that service basically means for me that university is not a standalone entity. A university is a part of community. The best universities are the ones that are engaged with community. They begin to bring in the issues of community and they begin to solve the issues of community. So I just came back from Singapore last week. They're thinking about future readiness. They're asking the question, is your university future ready? So the term future readiness basically means how do you envision the future? And as a result, very interesting, the kind of discussion that's going on. Some universities are training their students for jobs that are not already now there. They're training students for jobs that will be available in the future. Now imagine the level of thinking where what we are doing is we are still doing what we do, our majors and our same old PowerPoint notes and same old exam questions. Rodbodol kore dicchi amra. Across the board, I'm not saying here or backgrounds, but from the feedback that I get from various vice chancellors, I meet with them, from various faculty, wherever I meet, I like to talk to everybody because when I'm talking, my researcher's antenna is up. So I'm actually gathering data. And those things are very fundamental to the life of someone who wants to be a scholar. And I hope that at the end of the day I will learn something from you also. So we will be having an interactive session where I will ask you some questions to which I don't know the answers. Therefore, it will be something that we will be learning from each other. I think also about this notion, Dr. Musa is here, who I know from my IBA days. For those of you who do not know, I used to teach at IBA from 1978 to 84. Some of my students of IBA are now CEOs and heads of departments and even vice chancellors and all that. The thing they remember most, I believe, is the amount of engagement that I had with them, number one, and number two, the amount of outside work I gave them. It's not about books. I think we have also another former student of mine who did business communication, and they know how much I made them write real letters, not letters from Raymond Lessicar was the book, right, that we used. About 2 years ago, I met someone who was a very good student at IBA, Sarwar. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
He was the CEO of Syngenta at some time. No? Sarwar was with the Syngenta, which are the agricultural seeds and all that. He's not here anymore. He is now in New York. So he used to say in a gathering that Sir sent us to Taj jute backing across the river, because I wanted them to understand the production facility and then do an analysis of what can be done better. And they came back red-eyed when the report was performed, and they must have cursed me at that time. But 20 years later, when they became the CEOs, they said, "Sir, those were some of the most deep learning that we've ever had. And it's not from the books that we learned, it is from engagement, from experience, from doing what we did, is what enabled us to be where we are." So I'm just saying a few things. You also read a few quotes. I'm still getting letters from my students at Penn State. Because of you, I got this job, and so on and so forth. So it's very exciting, if you can build those students who come back to you after 15 years. Your rewards come later. Your hard work's result don't come immediately. It's an investment, like he knows. What is your return on investment? What is your return? Your return is the self-satisfaction that you have transformed a few people, you've transformed a few minds. So with that preamble, what I want to do is talk to you about some research that I've done, actually. So you can see that this is an empirical assessment. Really talking about the notion of student engagement and active learning. And this is, again, very preliminary, but I don't believe in lecturing from the books. I've always done this. I read these and then I come and have discussions. So even this is like a presentation to you. So look at this, tell me in your own words what you think might have been done better. But I think there will be some learning issues here that we can take away. So let's begin. I'd like to start with some motivational slides. So if I may start with the first one. Khalil Gibran theke, this is a very favorite quote of mine, where I say the true wealth of a nation lies not in its gold and silver, money, GDP and all that. It lies in its learning, wisdom and the uprightness of its sons. I think this is a wonderful quote that has always inspired me. And who but does this job of learning, wisdom and uprightness of the sons? This is done at the academic institutions. This is what is done from the family, number one, and number two, from the academic institutions. If the family and the academic institutions are not working in unison to build what we need in this country, we need people with learning, we need people with wisdom, and we need people with uprightness. We need people with honesty, with dedication. Then I think we have made a lot of progress. But I think the pace of that progress can become much faster if we could have a combination of those three. With Gibran, I'm going to add a few of my comments, but let me start. This should not be one-way lecturing. I think we should engage in conversations. Is there an extra microphone here, or a couple of microphones so that people can engage with me? Acha hai na? Let me see if my one works. Does this work?
There will be another.
If
There's one more there. There is another. There's another phone there.
Can you hear me without the microphone? Can you hear me? I don't think they can hear well. You can hear me, but you can't understand me. আরেকটা আছে ওখানে কোথাও? No, only for people to engage with me, that's all. I think a fundamental question that I always like to know from all of you also, what is an university? You know, we are all part of an university, but the question, I think, the deep philosophical issue that we should really understand is, what is an university? What do we do here? I would like to hear some of your perspectives first before we do what we do. Have you ever even reflected on that? How many of you have thought about it? What is this university and what is my role in it? Unless we contemplate that deeper question, being part of a university becomes, sort of very superficial. And I know of groups of people who come to the university because আর কোথাও চাকরি পেলাম না দেখি এখন ইউনিভার্সিটিতে খুঁজে দেখি পাওয়া যায় কিনা, অথবা there are those who say, let us use that as a platform until I get the job that I really want. That is one way of looking at the university, and the other way of looking is what I am really interested in. I would like to hear some of your viewpoints. What do you think an university is?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
This is Khandaka Ramgaraman. I am teaching here as a student professor, marketing department. Of course, we don't have department, it's marketing courses. The way we think, or I think, is the level of education, like primary, secondary, tertiary, and so on. So university is a tertiary level. It has a different purpose. It's not like we learn addition, subtraction, or some problem solving and then go out and do a job. It's about creating a man for the university, for the whole world, that you can fit in wherever you go, you can fit in wherever you can work. It's not only about knowledge, it's about learning, analysis, synthesis, whether you can synchronize what you learn, and can you apply this to the social and ethical mindset. So it's about being a total human being, so that you can fit in everywhere. The purpose is different. How we can create a total man with philosophical orientation. In primary level, we don't teach philosophy. But at tertiary level, you need to understand what you're doing and what's going in the background.
Okay. Any other views? Any other? Please address them so that, yes.
Sounds. Thank you very much. I started my teaching career at ITA. Before that, I was in the real health. I worked for one specialty for some years and also Bangladesh Bank. So it is other way around. There are who take university job as a stepping stone for other jobs. I did the reverse. There should be a love for teaching, and teaching should come from your inside. Quite often at North South University, while I was the director of the MBA program, I gave teachers who are not really built for teaching. Their orientation, their understanding, their inner feeling is not for university. To me, an university basically should create knowledge and disseminate it for the greater of the humanity. So therefore, sometimes when I found out some teachers who are not really that type, I always told them that do not stay here because it is not your place. Get out where you are a best fit. So even when I was here as Dean of School of Business, I always tried to say this kind of things to our teachers. It has to be that we will create human beings for the betterment of the humankind. That should be the role of university. Thank you, sir.
Okay. And then we'll give it to you. I think this is a wonderful conversation that we should have. Unless you have this conversation, we don't understand. Yes, please.
I'm from the Department of Economics. I teach here Master in Development Studies.
Okay.
What I learned from my own university, what many center of training and education. And it's not only the classroom, outside the classroom, and all types of what is not co-curriculum, like this mainstream curriculum. When I'm in ground, gym, when I'm in cultural, all together, it is a center of learning and education for students and teachers. And I also carried as a teacher here. I'm a learner, and I learn from my colleagues, from my students, even from my friends, many who comes here perhaps to attend meeting or to have some chance. So I think all together is the center of learning, training and education. Thank you.
Okay. One more view and then we'll move on, because I've got, I think, about 30 slides, so that can, it will take us about 3 days to finish. So it's up to you.
I'm Mohammed Jalil. I'm School of Business Media Department. I'm going to quote one of my mentors. There are many mentors in this class also, including yourself, who defined, I think Bangla defines university better. Professor Habib Rahman, he used to say, university is Vishwa Vidyalaya. It's a place when you come out, you are ready for the world. So I think, like he says, it comes from primary, secondary. When you come to, you are not ready for Bangladesh, you are ready for the world. So that's what I see university is all about. It's not from one context. And another thing, what I've learned, I'm changing, because when I used to teach before with you in 2008, not with you now, obviously, but I used to think teaching is all about management definitions, management courses, human resource definitions. But over the years, now I go to the class, if I can bring two changes to my students. One is, if I can make them self-learner, I've done my job, which is difficult. And second is, make them adaptable to the scenario, because it's a ever-changing world. So for me, university is like a strategic management course, 40 courses, where all those knowledge you have gathered over the years, and this is where you, based on your SWOT analysis, some will be creating knowledge as a researcher, and some will go as a practitioner and give the work. For me, that is university.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think this is a conversation that will never end, and there's no one view of this. There is multiple views, multiple ways of looking at it, and I think all views should be entertained to be able to bring together a very coherent picture of what an university is. I'll give you one of my views, that I use the same word twice. I think of universities as change makers of change makers. Reflect on it a little bit. Those students who will be coming here, when they go out, you expect them to be change makers. So how will they become change makers is what the university as a change maker should reflect on. And I think that is another view that I have sort of added to this. And these are taken from my op-ed writings. I do write once in a while in the newspapers when I get inspired. So there is a word, the universities are change makers of change makers, reforming, enlightening, galvanizing, and often creating new worlds. With wisdom and energy. Wisdom and energy is something I discovered, that in any institution you need wisdom that comes from the older people and energy that comes from the younger people, and you combine the two to make it a we factor. We is not necessarily just that we that you traditionally hear of. I've added a twist to it to say that we means wisdom and energy, and that's very important. And therefore, with wisdom and energy, the universities are beacons that radiate light into the far reaches of human endeavors to help push the limits of our knowledge. Deep in the spirit of discovery, minds bloom, hearts throb, souls stir. That is one thing that deep at midnight sometimes it struck me, and I wrote down a few notes, and then I said this grew into an article. And that article is just go to Daily Star and op-ed and my last name and you will see that it is there. There's another way that I look at it also. These are things that strike me every now and then. What am I doing here? And this is where I'm thinking that what we should be doing. The ideal university provides thought leadership, uncovers new knowledge, perfects the science of knowledge delivery, empowers stakeholders and builds enlightened citizenry. It promotes many intrinsic values: freedom of thought, equity and social justice, ethical responsibility, teamwork, innovation, service to society. So in a nutshell, I think the 4 or 5 of you, whatever you said, could probably summarize here. I would just like to add one other thing. If you look at the difference between our universities and the Western universities, Dr. Musa said that what do we do at the universities? We create knowledge and we disseminate knowledge, right? I'll add one more leg to it, and then it will become a stable tool. Otherwise, this tool will not stand on 2 legs alone. The real university also finds ways of using knowledge. So the Western world, as you've seen, they've not only done the research and shared it, but they've also found ways of using that knowledge. And that is why they are so far ahead. So somewhere along the line, I think we have to find ways in which whatever knowledge is generated. And the other thing is we must not think in terms of silos. Like let us say the electrical engineering department has built something. They may not have the wherewithal to understand how to make it a business proposition. So this is where the business school comes in and other economics comes in, whatever it is. The schools must start to become interdisciplinary. The schools should start to begin, the departments should begin to talk to each other. And I'll tell you what, Singapore, they were thinking that we are going to get rid of majors like electrical engineering, architecture, economics. We are going to give majors on fields like energy, water, climate change, and these will be addressed in an interdisciplinary way to solve the real problems of society. So this is another approach. Now obviously we know how our hands are tied in terms of regulations, in terms of people's thinking, in terms of UGC or whatever it is, that these transitions are not easy to do. But I think these are the seeds that can be planted for the younger generation when you are ready to take up administrative positions. We have to innovate. I think our systems, our universities are also things, service institutions that can be innovated further. Somehow this resistance to innovation is something that I see as a very major obstacle to competing with the rest of the world. We believe in certain structures and we remain confined to those structures. I have to tell you, this is a world of disruption. Economists know the work of Joe Schumpeter, who says you must creatively destroy what you have now. The whole notion of creative destruction. So if you really deeply want universities to change and transform themselves, look from within and say, how can we transform it? So when in Singapore, there was another very critical discussion. Should universities specialize or should they generalize? What do you think the answer was? Any thoughts?
Could be both. Field-wise or major-wise?
Should we specialize or should we generalize as an institution? Bolin, we can hear you. Just give us the answer. What do you think?
I think it depends on the societal context. Very backward society, they go with the specialization. And when they are more advanced, they go with
Okay. So, any views? Makes sense. Makes sense. Any other views?
University should be generalized.
Universities should be generalized.
And institute should be,
Okay.
but if they are targeting field, they will go specialized.
I think again this is another.
Sorry, can I go with the sound coming out?
I would like you to carry on this discussion within the university. This is not something that has immediate answer, but one of the things that they were saying is that the future is very uncertain because of the way things are evolving. Given this uncertainty, instead of preparing students with deep specialization that may not ever emerge, on the other hand, they are also saying that but we must prepare students for the jobs of the future, not jobs of today. So you can begin to see that even the academic world is still undecided on where they should go and what they should be doing. But at least one of the critical understanding was that universities must provide the fundamentals to a student who can go out in the real world and be flexible and adaptive, that they can do any job. And therefore they are saying the fundamentals are, what are the fundamentals? Mathematics. Fundamentals are, English, communication, some digital skills. So I got up and spoke there and said, BRAC University, we are trying to do something called the general education program. In the general education, they always had it in BRAC, but what we did is we focused it and we said that every student must go through the general education program, every student, across engineering, literature, whatever it is. And they must get 5 fundamental skills out of this general education. Skill number 1, critical thinking and problem solving. Skill number 2, deep communication. Pocket na malle hai. I'd like to make things a little lighter. Thank you. So the first thing is critical thinking. Second thing, communication skills. This is a world of communication. If you're not able to reach people, if you're not able to communicate well, you're not going to go too far. Third thing is some basic quantitative skills. I don't care if you're English major, I don't care if you are law or somewhere else. Even in business schools I have seen that they're doing quantitative at one level, but as they go higher up, there's no application of these quantitatives. Just simply no applications, or very little application. So that's the third. The fourth one is, we want all our students to have digital skills. They must be competent at some level of digitalization. And the fifth thing we want all our students to have is some global awareness. What is happening in the world today, not just in your own domain. So when I said that in Singapore to some colleagues there, the reaction was very sharp. They said that you're already ahead of us, because we are thinking how to skill our students that they can face anything. And the way they can face anything, I know that those of you who have been in engineering, there's a huge discussion on STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering and mathematics. They're saying those 4 fundamentals can be fixed. Our students can do anything. So I think these are some of the conversations that are very important, very vital for universities. And let me share one last one, and then we'll move on to our presentation. A very interesting discussion came about was, are our students products or are our students customers? What do you think?
So it will be public broadcasting system.
Okay.
Yeah, the knowledge is the product, the students are the workers. That's what
Students are the workers.
That's what they say, right?
All right. One view of public broadcasting system, but there was a huge debate on this one, and people were very emotionally attached to these things. So one view was that yes, they are coming into the institutions as raw materials. And I remember this, I had this interview when I was at IBA, when there was only BTV, and there was a BTV interview in which I had said that, the students enter our students as raw materials, they go through a transformation process, and when they are done, they come out as finished products. But now there's the other discussion that many students are very well versed today. Many students are very competent, and they have, wherever they've learned from, sometimes they can rival the knowledge of many of me even. They know a little bit more than I do. And I have said that these are the people who know what they want from the institutions. Sometimes the institution does not do an evaluation of what the needs are of students. We keep giving them what we think we need. So that's called, as those of you in marketing, the production orientation. We produce this, you take it or leave it. Whereas on the other hand, the customers, if we want to look at them from a customer, what should we equip them with that they can become successful producers when they hit the market? But interestingly, at that conference, the final conclusion was students are neither products, students are nor are they customers. And this is very fundamental to what we should be doing at university. They said students are co-creators of knowledge. Co-creators of knowledge. So when we look at our students, we should not look at them as empty vessels to be filled. We should look at them as partners in the knowledge production and knowledge exchange that would enable us to really build the universities that are high class, that are forward looking, and that is what they do. You see, if you take one example, let me give the example of MIT. MIT budget koto, who knows? Is there anyone who can make a guess? 2015-16 এর আমি number বলছি, I don't know this year's. The budget is $3.5 billion with a B. এক বছরের budget. And of that budget, the money comes, 10% of the money comes from student tuition fees. In our universities, where does the money come from? 95% come from the students. Maybe some...
100%.
For many. Brack University, I can claim that we bring in a lot of research grants. Yes. Well, and I think many are making the move. But yes, lots of the universities are dependent 100% on students. So now you make students your customers. They can dictate, or there is a region for conflict there. But the fundamentals, if you look at MIT, this budget, 90% comes from research grants, government grants, industry affiliations, upskilling. Today, what they're doing, Singapore, very interesting. They're saying that people who are 40 years of age and older, they're already outdated. You have to bring them back to the university and upskill them and reskill them. So our universities are not thinking of that even. Of course, we understand what the demographic pressures are. I mean, at Brack University, we have 6,000-7,000 applicants. We take only 10%. 90% we just have no room for them. So the point is that we have to, first of all, as a community, we have to start thinking about what do we do, what is this university, what is our role, what is our job, what is our mission. Once the mission is clear, then you'll see everything will begin to sort of fall in place. Now we spent about roughly an hour and I've not even gone through my first slide, as you've seen that. So I said we'll need about 3 days, so brace yourselves. Nevertheless, we move on. So today's agenda, I want to talk about a few transformative ideas in teaching. Current scenario of teaching in Bangladesh, and this is based on my experiences, this is not an empirical study. The active learning paradigm, understanding students, engaging students, then I give you a theoretical model of my study, the methodology, analysis, findings, and will give you some concluding thoughts. So let's start here with some of the ideas. As you have seen, the first thing that I said, and this is, I keep hammering this away at Brack University, that you should not see yourself as teaching, lecturing. J.J. Nishta is very common in our part of the world. You should find ways of reaching your students. And when I say reaching, I say that reaching the minds, the hearts, and the soul. Because that's when you do the real transformation. You can't transform by addressing only one part. Because I also think of these are some of the conversations we are having at Brack University. What is the building humans, as you have mentioned? So humans build korte gele, we cannot just transform their cognitive space, which is what we do in the academic institution. We are giving them knowledge, pouring them into their head, and then midterm and final they are memorizing, they are regurgitating exams, we are giving them grades. At the end of 4 years, we are giving them a certificate. Have we truly done some transformations? So I think the best way that we should all start thinking is, how can we start reaching our students? You have to transform the mind, you have to transform the heart, you have to transform, and that, when I say the soul, I think a complete human being is only complete when there is also some spiritual thinking that goes on within the system. These are some of the things that we don't quite look at. We only think that if we can fill their minds with some things, some concepts and some things, we have basically done the job. I think it's much more work is needed to fundamentally transform human beings. So essentially what we are seeing is, teaching is no longer what it used to be. You know the difference between andragogy and pedagogy, do you? How many of you know the difference? Okay, we see one person. You've been in our FLTR class as far as I remember, see? I don't forget 2 of you. The rest of you probably have not heard about it. Why don't you tell us what it is?
So pedagogy involves more, when you consider, it's like this. When we try to teach something to the students, instead of encouraging the participation, encouraging the knowledge generation, pedagogy is more like school teaching. Whenever we consider that students know nothing, we'll have to give all the knowledges to the students and they will become knowledgeable. And in case of pedagogy, we accept that there are some knowledges, the students also know some things, but we are trying to improve, we are trying to inspire.
Okay. Do you want to add to that?
Pedagogy, I mean, in a phrase, it's passive learning, and pedagogy in a phrase, it's passive learning, and andragogy, active learning.
Okay, it's another way. And a third way that I will add to embellish is, pedagogy is how children learn, andragogy is how adults learn. And if we don't see that difference, then we are not in the business of doing what we do. So adults learn in completely different ways. And unless we reach out to them in the ways that they can learn, we cannot make them do this lecture, because you're going to lose them. So, so these things have changed over time. I think it is seen by many as the new art and science of teaching. And there's a lot of research going on, by the way. Even last night I was reading to see What else is happening in this area of active learning? In the sciences, they are saying that this active learning has had effect, but not to the extent they had thought it would. And again, these are empirical research, which means that they have to go back and find out what are some alternatives. Please understand that an university is like any other institution, must go through a process of Kaizen, must go through a process of continuous quality improvement. If you don't improve on a regular basis, and this is where leadership comes in, but leadership has to partner with the other stakeholders and begin to make the case that are we doing everything right? What are some things we can do better? That is the learning university, the university that learns itself through its assessments and all these other things, and seeing what's going on in the world out there. Then you can basically chart out a path and say, these are some of the things that we need to do. So this is an art and science, teaching, reaching students. This is not something that is taken lightly. According to Smith, good way of exploring pedagogy, or andragogy is the word that we should use here, is the process of accompanying learners, caring for and about them, and bringing learning into life. I've heard some people say that don't be the preacher teacher. Teachers are preachers. Teachers as the sage on the stage. Get away from that. What they're saying is be the guide on the side. So you show them the way, give them problems to solve, engage them in their own, using their own minds, and see that they'll become much better transformed students. Last but not least, I would have to say that to be a good teacher, it's a journey. We just heard from you that in the early days you used to go and give them management, the concepts. Over time you have learned that this is not what it is all about. And so you have to go through a process of self-discovery also. You have to ask yourself, what am I doing? Can I do some things a little better? If you don't approach it that way, with total commitment, then it will not work. Pardon me for saying this, but I will say this. I see teachers in our general system at about 4 levels. Level 1 is the employee teacher. Ghori dekhe ashen, ghori dekhe chole jan. They're there, class is shomai, then they're gone. You can't even find them anywhere. The second category is the teacher. Parashona koren kichu, spend some time and then brings that into the classroom. The third level I see is the scholar, who does both the teaching as well as research. He's interested in bringing his or her own perspective into this dimension of the knowledge world. And the fourth level I see as the public intellectual. Think of Amartya Sen. When he says something, the whole world listens and reads. It will not work. People will hear, read it and say, acha bola sector. So you have to attain that, and that does not happen overnight also. So you have to work hard. The employee teacher, the teacher, the scholar teacher, and last but not least is the public intellectual. This is a journey, it takes time. So you have to see where you are in the process and what is the next level you want to do. And I think it is about touching lives, transforming them. Those in your care must reach a higher level of Verstehen, is a German word for understanding. The real student must understand. If they don't understand, they are not going to be able. Memorization will not help. So that's where we go. Some larger connections, I think that this is something I've added only recently in the last few days as my mind keeps working to see how I can give this same presentation I gave about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, was not exactly this. So here's what I would like to sort of share with you, that you have to connect what you do in the classroom with some other things. You have to connect it with learning objectives and learning outcomes, and I will explain those to you. You have to connect the learning outcome with the graduate student profile, and you have to connect the graduate student profile with the mission and vision statement. So to give you an example, let's look at it like this. Our main interest is what? Our main interest is to build successful students who are these human beings who will go out and become the change makers. So if we are to build those, it has to be built into our mission and vision statement. It has to be there. Then what we do is we must have some learning outcomes. What are these learning outcomes? In my university, I've given you those 5 learning outcomes. In general education, 42 credits, students must have 5 learning outcomes. Critical thinking, communication, quantitative skills, digital skills, and global awareness. You can add to that, or you can focus on something else. That should be reflected in your mission. What do I want my students to be imparted with? And the learning objectives in any course, you must be able to measure what you have delivered to the students. That measurement should be in terms of your learning outcomes. When I came to Barack University, the first thing I noticed was the syllabuses were not standardized. People were writing syllabuses as they felt. So I gave them 9 things that they must include in their syllabus. And the first thing I said was, you must write your learning objectives. What do you want the students to learn? Once you are clear what you want them to learn, then your whole assessment, your training, your lecture delivery, everything will be attuned to the learning objectives. Otherwise the class becomes random. One day you do this, one day you do that. Students don't know how they're connecting things with each other. So to be a good teacher, you must also be a planner. You must plan at the end of the semester, out of my course, these are the 5 things that my students will learn.